পাঠিয়েছি সোমেন স্যারকে আর দিতে পারিস, আমাকেও পাঠিয়ে দিচ্ছি।
অনুপম স্যার, শোনা যাচ্ছে তো?
হ্যাঁ, শোনা যাচ্ছে।
আচ্ছা আচ্ছা, ঠিক আছে।
স্যার একটু ইউটিউবের সাউন্ডটাকে একবার চেক করবে?
অসুবিধা নেই। পুরো তাহলে সিস্টেম সেট থাকবে একদম। ইয়েস। স্ট্রিমিং কি স্টার্ট হয়েছে? ইজ ইট স্টার্টেড?
স্যার স্ট্রিমিং ইউটিউবে স্টার্ট হয়ে গেছে, এখান থেকে স্ট্রিমিং স্টার্ট করবেন।
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, কি আচ্ছা, কেউ একজন একটু অডিওটা চেক করো তো। ইউটিউবের ভিডিওটা জাস্ট ঢুকে দেখো তো, ওই যা বলছি শোনা যাচ্ছে কিনা। একটু ডিলে থাকবে 20-30 সেকেন্ডস। স্ট্রিমিং কি স্টার্ট হয়েছে? ইজ ইট স্টার্টেড?
স্যার স্ট্রিমিং ইউটিউবে স্টার্ট হয়ে গেছে, এখান থেকে স্ট্রিমিং স্টার্ট করবেন।
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, কি আচ্ছা, কেউ একজন একটু অডিওটা চেক করো তো। ঠিক আছে। অনুপম স্যার, সব ঠিকই তো আছে দেখছি আজকে, কোনো অসুবিধা নেই। Joardar sir, madam have already joined the meeting. Should we start? Very good afternoon to one and all. On behalf of the organizing committee, I'm welcoming all the dignitaries, our eminent speaker for the day and the participants on this third day of the faculty development program on research trends and methodologies in machine learning, RTMML 2022, organized by the Department of CSE, CSE EIML, CSE Data Science, and CSE Cybersecurity in association with IQAC, Haldia Institute of Technology. All the participants are requested to follow the session on the respective platforms watchfully. You can definitely put up your questions for our eminent speaker for the day on the chat box as usual way. In the end, we'll definitely have the Q&A session with ma'am, and definitely attendance form link will be shared in both Google Meet and YouTube streaming linked chat box during the ongoing session. Form will stay open for around 1 hour only, so we are requesting everyone to keep a watch on the chat box, please. We have Dr. Aratna Malik with us today as our eminent speaker for the day. Dr. Aratna Malik earned her PhD in Human Communication Studies from the University of Denver, USA in 2007. She has been serving Indian Institute of Technology Kharagpur as faculty since 2008. She has served in a diversity of roles both in India and abroad. Her research and teaching interests include organizational communication, human resource management, business ethics, corporate governance, entrepreneurship, and organizational behavior. She has also been a regular contributor to the National Program on Technology Enhanced Learning, in short NPTEL. So we are definitely sure that all the participants will find today's session to be very much useful and helpful at the same time, as it is based on a very broad and very important domain which is common for all the researchers across. So without any further ado, I'm inviting Dr. Aratna Malik ma'am to deliver her talk on this third day on FDP on the topic of research ethics. Ma'am, over to you. Yeah. I think she have left the meeting.
Obijit, she was, yes, she joined.
Yes, she earlier also have joined. Ma'am, welcome. Welcome in this session, and it's all over to you, ma'am. You can start your session.
Thank you, Dr. Sarkar. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much, Professor Joardar. I'm sorry, there's some connection issue at my end, so please forgive me. But I'll try to be.
Thank you, myself, Dr. Joardar. Thank you, ma'am.
Namaskar to everybody. Welcome to the session. It was, I didn't know much about machine learning, so I thought I would, initially I thought I would check with Dr. Joardar to see what he was expecting, and then I thought I'll at least read up some introductory material and then maybe talk to you a little bit about research ethics with some focus on machine learning and artificial intelligence. So please feel free to interrupt me, correct me, talk whenever you feel like. Now, I have a request. I'm not comfortable being recorded, so can you please not record this session?
Yes.
Anupam.
Yes, Anupam sir, please look at this.
Rajiv Dubey.
Yes. Please stop the recording.
Rajiv Dubey. Anupam. Ma'am, just a minute. We will.
Thank you.
Yes, we are trying to contact with
Thank
the
you so
person.
much.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
So in the meantime, maybe we'll just wait till the recording stops and then we can start the session. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, please proceed.
Great. Fantastic. So what we'll do is I will share my slides with you, and you can take down whatever you want to take down from the slides while they're up. And then please feel free to interrupt me. Please feel free to, offer your own experiences. Just raise your hand, and let's have this as a discussion session, if that's okay with the organizers. I hope that's all right with you, Dr. Sarkar.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. No issue. No issue. We'll be looking our watch on the chat box as well to see the queries, questions the participants are having.
Very nice.
Definitely forward that to you.
Wonderful. So, it'll be nice if this can be an introductory session, and if there is some issue with the connection, which is what was happening earlier, then I'll just switch off my video and you can still hear my voice. So I think that should work.
Absolutely fine, ma'am.
Thank you so much. So on that note, I will share my screen with you. Here is. Yes, is the screen visible? Are the slides visible?
Yes, ma'am, the slide is visible, but it would be better if you put it in full screen.
Yes, I'll do that. Okay, is this better?
Still now it is not showing up in full screen.
It's in slideshow mode, so it should come.
But I think, ma'am, you can proceed. Okay.
Yeah. Is the slideshow mode on at your end? Do you see the slideshow mode?
No, ma'am, it is not there.
Okay, let me try again. Okay. Is the slideshow mode visible to you?
Still the same view, ma'am. But I think you can. Yeah, but you can continue, ma'am. It's absolutely visible, fine, no issues. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we'll talk about research ethics, and we'll talk about ethics from different standpoints. We'll start with a discussion on what ethics is, how it applies to artificial intelligence and machine learning, and then we'll move on to more generic understandings of how you can be ethical in your research work. What is research ethics? Research refers to an activity designed to test a hypothesis, permit conclusions to be drawn, and thereby to develop or contribute to generalizable knowledge, which is expressed, for example, in theories, principles, and statements of relationships. So this is what research is. And so we find knowledge that already exists. Okay? Now, exploratory research is a quest to discover or develop new knowledge rooted in current knowledge, or to extend current knowledge in directions unknown or unexplored. And we have action research. Action research is when we take problems from the field and we find solutions from them for those problems based on our understanding of theory, and then we apply those solutions to the field and see how well our solutions have solved the problem that we were trying to solve. So it is a very delicate balance between theory and practice. So we get into the situation, we draw the problem from within the situation, we come out of it, we distance ourselves from the problem, We look at it from a theoretical standpoint. We look at it from the perspective of whatever we have found or learned from the literature. And then we develop solutions for it based on our understanding of similar problems across different circumstances, in different environments, in different parameters, and then we develop solutions, and then we take them back to the field and we apply them, and then we study how well or how badly we have solved the problem. So that is called action research, where you see the results of your research there and then, and that forms part of your study. Now, ethics refers to the rightness or wrongness of a concept, act, or situation. Very simply, whether we are doing things, whether what we have done is right or wrong, not correct or incorrect, because that refers to accuracy. We are talking about whether it is right or wrong, whether it should have been or should not have been done. Now, a little bit about the history. A study of ethics.
Ma'am, sorry to interrupt you. Just a thing I would like to share. The slides are not changing. Still, we are getting the front slide view.
Oh my God. Okay, let's see.
I think there are a couple of options you can go for.
Yes.
I think you can try for pressing F5 key.
F5 key. Okay.
F5 key, that might work. Or even you can present your entire screen.
Okay, I will try.
Yes.
F5 key. Okay, I think this is the one you're talking about.
I don't think it is working. You can share your entire screen. Yes, you can share your entire screen.
PC screen only, duplicate. No, but this is not. I think that's for a projector, right? F5 key is for the projector.
Ma'am, you can try sharing your entire screen.
Okay.
I think in that way everything should be in sync.
All right. Okay. It's not giving me the option. It just says cancel. I don't know what's happening here. The share option seems to have been disabled.
I think on that opened up window, you have to click the screen icon which is appearing in small. Click the total screen icon once and then
I get it. Thank you so much. Yeah, I haven't done this very much. All right. Now, is it working?
Yes. Can you move between the slides just to see the progress?
Yeah.
Change the slide.
I just did.
Yes, it is working. It is in slide number 4, I can see.
Yeah. This is slide number 3. So, thank you. All right. Is this visible now?
Absolutely, ma'am. Please proceed.
Great. Thank you so much. So, the emphasis on research ethics came about after the Second World War, in which experiments were conducted on prisoners in concentration camps. We are all aware of what happened during the Holocaust. A large body of medical or biomedical research came out of human testing, which is banned, completely banned. I mean, there are very stringent policies and procedures that one has to go through in order to conduct research on human beings these days, in order to collect samples, from human beings. There is a repository of body fluids that is there in different countries. So there is one nodal repository in China now. So people are actively trying to collect body samples so that they can do research in, instead of puncturing a person's body or drawing samples from a live person, the samples that have already been collected. But if some part of that sample is not used, it can be deposited and preserved in laboratories. So that is the way that biomedical research is going these days. However, during the Second World War, because these prisoners were readily available and the idea was to torture them and to end the race at that point of time, that is when experiments were conducted on these prisoners. And after the Second World War, this became a huge, a very, very significant issue for ethical concerns regarding biomedical research were raised as a result of these experiments that were conducted. Okay. Now, some levels at which we see ethical decisions. The first is moral intuition, which is expressed in the statement of the sort, this is right or this is wrong. So we just know internally, inherently, whether something is right or wrong. Okay. The second level is explicit morality. We say one should always do this. Okay. So one should always give credit to the original author of a work, to the original creator of a piece of knowledge. One should never plagiarize. So we are very explicit, we are very, very complete and definitive in our statements. That is explicit morality, where we wear our agendas on our sleeves, so to say. Moral intuition is you know something is right or wrong and you do it without really justifying your reason for it. Explicit is when we start talking about it, when we start expressing it, when we are very definitive, clear-cut, black and white about it. Ethical theory is when we start finding reasons, the justification of morality drawing on moral philosophy. So we, in order to convince others or even ourselves, we say, yes, this feels right because I should do this because. So when the because comes in, we are thinking ahead of daily ethics or morality or intuition. We are trying to find reasons that we can understand, that we can relate to, that will justify our actions. And the last level is meta-ethics, where we start talking about ethical theories, where we start describing or theorizing ethical theories. We find out the reasons why something should be considered right or wrong, how ethics plays in different cultures and different circumstances within different parameters. How will ethical decisions change if the parameters change? Why should parameters change, etc. So when we start talking about the ethics of ethical decisions, that is called meta-ethics. Okay, some ethical theories. We have consequentialist theories, and I'll just tell you how this relates to machine learning. This is not a lecture or a talk on ethics per se, but if we understand some of the background of how ethical decision making came into being and how we can make ethical decisions and what we can do with these ethical decisions, then our understanding of research ethics becomes a little more developed, and we begin to understand why we are talking about what we are talking about. So consequentialist theories are outcome based. Okay, does it benefit the greater, or is it in the interest of the greater good or not? The process doesn't matter, the consequence matters, the outcome of a decision matters. If you are developing a medicine, even if you're experimenting on, say, great apes, which is now banned, you're drawing samples from chimpanzees and gorillas, and so, as long as a medicine for, say, cancer comes out of that experimentation, it is okay to harm or even completely render a species extinct in the interest of the greater good of humankind. That would be consequentialist ethics. So what? We will put them in breeding camps. We will, they will. It's okay to experiment on great apes because we are more powerful. Deontological theories are motivation based. Why am I doing this? So when we talk about the experiments conducted on human prisoners in concentration camps during the Holocaust, during the Second World War, they were more of deontological ethics was in play at that time. They said our motivation is to develop a medicine, a cure for these diseases, and that is why we are conducting these experiments. It's not the outcome. So the motivation is, the motivation is in the right place. That was from the perspective of the researchers. Now, as far as the SS officers were concerned, the motivation was we have to kill these people anyway. The outcome can justify the means of achieving this end result. So the Nazi officers said that we will get a cure. Okay, we will get a cure. So the outcome will justify the means of achieving the cure. So the Nazi officers said that, look, we will eventually, we have to eradicate this race. So might as well use them for something that can benefit the rest of the races that will be left behind in the world. Is this part clear to everybody? Any questions?
Till now, I can't see any queries or questions from the participant side.
Thank you.
I'll let you know. Okay, once
Thank you.
the question starts coming up, I will let you know. Please continue.
Okay. Now, some primary concerns. One primary concern of artificial intelligence from a lay person's perspective is that it is ego. Garbage in, garbage out. After all, the programs that have been designed by human beings. I teach communication. From the perspective of a communication person, I can tell you that any time a message is designed in whatever language, whether it is English or C++ or any other, or Java or whatever code you use, but your understanding of creating a message, of that message that you are creating, your intention while creating the message, your knowledge of the appropriate language travels with you when that message is created. To give you an example, when computers were just coming into India, I remember I was very young, I was in school that time, this was mid-80s, and we were living in Shimla, so our access to technology was quite limited, and we'd heard about these home computers. Now this computer was nothing but they had a keyboard that could be connected to your TV screen, and we had those old, I think they were cathode ray tubes, probably, the old TVs with the little thing sticking out at the back. So those televisions were there. So one lead would go from the keyboard to the television, another lead would go, or another wire would go from the keyboard to a regular tape recorder where you had those magnetic tapes with spools. And so we would type in information into the computer. It would first be recorded into the cassette player, and then I think something was connected from the cassette player also to the television. So the audio signals transmitted by the cassette player eventually translated into a program, or it probably was connected back to the computer, and then, or the little keyboard type of thing we had, and that would eventually be displayed on the screen in the form of a program. And we learned it was quite interesting. Now, in my hometown, we still had that contraption. It was called the ZX Spectrum. Some of you may have heard about it, seen it, but there were these big shops that would sell programs, and the book, the programming language was basic, and we learned the if-then loop, and that was my training in computers. And so we had this condition growing up that if you can design a game and record it, recording it took some time. So we first had to type it. You could not record it in the middle of the program. So you had to first type the whole program. Once the whole program had been typed, then it would be recorded onto the spool, onto the magnetic tape, and this would be like, very funny kind of sound, choo, 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 cup, 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 cup. And then after that process was complete, that is when one could be confident that it had now been saved. But if, for example, there was a power cut while you were typing the program, or while the program was being uploaded to the audio cassette, then the entire effort would be lost. So, and if you typed in some command that was not acceptable or that wasn't right, while typing you wouldn't come to know. But then if you had a program that required an entry, the computer would tell you, the message that would flash would be stupid command or rubbish command. And my father would say that your computer is scolding me. Ye computer kaisa hai? Mujhe gussa karta hai. I hope people understand Hindi here.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Definitely.
So is it okay if just to exemplify certain things?
Definitely, no issues.
My father said, he said, this computer doesn't have manners. Ye mujhe gussa kar raha hai. It's calling me stupid. Now, what was that? It was just the language that had been used by the programmers of that program or the people who had designed this contraption. The language that they understood, the language that they felt would be most easily understood by all sections of society. Okay? And over time, things changed. But at the very core, you're all computer professionals. You know this much, much better than I do. It is all, what you put in is what you get out of a computer program. Right? So it's just gigo. Garbage in or intelligence in, intelligence out. Whatever. But that is the primary concern, whatever goes in. So when we talk about ethics in machine learning, from the perspective of a layperson who understands this core of machine learning and artificial intelligence in the way that I've just described it, one feels that the ethical decisions need to be taken at the level of creating programs. And those of you who are into e-security would know this much better than I do, that whenever you create a program, you have to build in the security measures while creating programs. You cannot leave loopholes and plug them in later because somebody will come in. Anytime you're manufacturing anything, anytime you're creating anything, you have to build in the security measures while creating whatever it is that you're creating, whether it's a program, whether it is a house that you're building. Unless you put the right kind of cement in the mixture, concrete mixture, the house will not be sturdy. So it is while building something that you need to really take all kinds of measures to ensure that you're doing things right. Coming back and trying to fix things will not work. Purposes of artificial intelligence. What do we use artificial intelligence for? Efficiency optimization, profit maximization. That's a no-brainer. Another purpose of artificial intelligence is social control. How and why? The rapidly growing abilities to collect data in conjunction with artificial intelligence's ability to detect patterns and correlations between variables allow for new ways of controlling human behavior. It is eerie It is scary. You go on the computer and the computer tells you what you're thinking. Why? Because we've been using computer programs so much. You type in something in Google and Google has studied whatever you've been typing in and it will give you suggestions based on that. It will give you suggestions based on where you are. To give you an example, I've been living in West Bengal for the past 14 years. But I'm in a cosmopolitan environment in IIT Kharagpur. I can follow Bengali, but I cannot read Bengali. I can follow some Bengali, not all of it. Okay. Now, the advertisements that come, whether you're on the phone or on the television still you can, change things. But if you are on, say, YouTube or you're watching any other program on the phone or the messages that come, the promotional messages, they all come in Bengali. There are two ways of looking at it. One, yes, I'm living in Bengal. I should be learning Bengali. I cannot follow those advertisements unless I learn Bengali. So my thinking process, if I really get somehow pulled into the visual content of those promotional messages, I must find some way to learn Bengali so that I can understand what is going on, so that I can become a part of the socio-cultural milieu. Fantastic, excellent motivation. Another way of looking at it is, I am living in a free country. I am working in a cosmopolitan environment. Why am I seeing these messages? Why am I being forced to learn Bengali? That is another way of looking at it. Both ways are valid. Okay. But these messages are telling you, or the message is telling you that, look, if you don't understand Bengali, then this message is not for you. Yes? You see what I'm saying? So, if you want to understand it, you must learn Bengali. Or if you don't understand the message, if you can't take the effort to learn this language and understand the message that you're listening to, then you have no business listening to this message. And in a way, exaggerated, extrapolated, maybe if you don't understand Bengali, you shouldn't be living in Bengal. Who knows? It could be interpreted that way also. Social control. People are collecting information. Plus, pattern detection, consumer behavior is being studied left, right, and center. Sometimes it's irritating when the computer tells you what they think you might need. You buy something on Amazon and then you will get all these suggestions at the bottom. People who bought this also liked this. It's not like whatever site you visit or whatever product you view after you have bought X is recorded in the system. Such activities of 1 million customers are recorded in the system at Amazon, and then these patterns are detected and each one gets suggestions based on what they have viewed. Why? Because their only goal is to maximize their own profits. So they are just trying to sell their items. So they say, okay, well, if you bought a sofa, maybe you need a side table also. If you bought a side table, maybe you need a curio to put on that side table. If you bought a bookshelf, maybe you will want to read these books. Maybe I bought a bookshelf to store my, my utensils in. Who knows? Who is anyone to decide what I put in my kitchen or where I put my books? However, they will try to sell these items, and as a result of this, a lot of homogeneity is creeping into our social fabric. Say maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, when you traveled across India, every 200 kilometers, the socio-cultural fabric would change. People were talking in different languages, they were using their native language, they were wearing their native clothes, they were eating their native food. These days, because everything is available to everybody, I was able to order a Subway sandwich for lunch sitting at my residence in IIT Kharagpur. We'd never heard of these things. So, a person outside the IIT campus, a person in a village within Kharagpur, knows what a Subway sandwich is. Okay? How would you get access to these things? Only through these, again, the information has spread. People are trying to predict what people might need or want, so people go out and eat, or if they install Zomato or Swiggy or any other food delivery app on their phones, they will have access to things that they may never have tried in their lives or even heard of in their lives. So there's a lot of homogenization, availability of products and services across the board leads to homogenized usage of those products and services. And once people get used to these things, then it becomes easier to control them when you withdraw certain things that they have become used to. Okay. Okay. Human flourishing. AI can also be used as a tool that helps individuals and groups identify worthwhile goals and supports them in their pursuit of excellence in achieving these goals. So this is again a no-brainer. This is something we know. This is what AI ideally should be used for, explicit ethical theory. Now, applicable ethical theories here would be, we have technology ethics, we have information ethics, we have computer ethics. You can look into these. Ensuring ethical research. Some primary concerns while conducting ethical research. When you start with ethical research, okay, before this, do you have any questions up to this point?
No, ma'am. As of now, I can't see any questions. Actually, the way you are actually explaining things are very, very outstanding, I'll say, and very much understandable.
That's very kind of you to say that. Thank you. Primary concerns while ensuring ethical research are, is it true? When we start thinking about research, ethically conducting research, the first thing we must ask ourselves while reporting research results or while even thinking of a question is it true? Whatever we are trying to explore or find out, is it true? Whatever we are reading, whatever we are basing our knowledge on, is that true? Accuracy of results. Once you've collected the information, accuracy of results becomes essential. Ethical acquisition of samples and treatment of data. Now I'll tell you different kinds of samples that we come across. Have the samples for the study been acquired ethically? And has the data been treated ethically? Is it fair? Has the sample been treated fairly? Have I looked at enough literature? Have I looked at both sides of the coin? Have I tried to find out? Have I conducted a balanced search into the literature? Have I looked at the points or the literature that supports my hypothesis and the literature that opposes my hypothesis, and then come to a logical conclusion and defended what I'm trying to say by way of a logical conclusion? Have I done that? Has it been possible to do that? Is it wise? So, has the research that I have conducted been for the greater good of the people? And can it be replicated? Now, when I talk about the wisdom behind research, there are a lot of sanctions, there are, excuse me. Research into items like ammunition, biomedical research, immunology, virology, bacteriology, all of this research has, very stringent regulations are associated with this kind of research. Research into the radioactive material, when you use radioactive material, when you use personal information. Now coming to your field, unfortunately in India, privacy of personal data has not been a big concern, you know, ever. It is increasingly becoming an important concern, but we ask people for, you know, for random information, and people don't hesitate giving it to you. And then, you know, these pockets of criminals who use this personal information in very unethical ways have come up. So what are you trying to find out? Now let me think of an example that may relate to your field. When we collect personal information of people, okay, standard questions are asked on forms. You know, we think they are standard questions. Now, I earned my PhD abroad, so I was quite surprised initially and quite pleasantly, reassured that you know, what I needed to do needed to have a reason. So we ask questions like, okay, name, first name, last name, father's or husband's name, date of birth, religion, permanent address, phone number, ye wo, height, weight, whatever. We are asking these things randomly on every form. Why do you want somebody to disclose their date of birth for, say, a railway on the, I don't know whether it's, say when they are trying to go in for an eye checkup? How does it matter? Why do you want to know their date of birth for an eye checkup or for a dental examination? You just ask them how old they are, age and completed years. What are you going to do with information about their father or their husband or their marital status? Why do you want that information? Why do you want to know their religion if all you're doing is examining their teeth or removing a wart from their skin? Why? Why do you want to know somebody's religion when they open a bank account? How does it matter? Okay. So, father's husband's name, why? You have somebody's Aadhaar card, you just type in the Aadhaar card number and verify whether it's a valid Aadhaar card or not. Why do you want all of this information? Why does this information need to be made available to every Tom, Dick or Harry? Why? You open an email account and they ask for your date of birth. Why? Okay. Year of birth, yes, I can see that they have strict regulations, strict stipulations. Month and year of birth should suffice. And or a disclaimer saying that yes, I'm over 18 years of age. That's it. And if and you have all those regulations, why do you want to know all these things? But we don't, you know, so the social good. What are we trying to achieve? When we start talking about religion and caste, the column of caste has now been removed. Earlier, it was there in many forms. Why do you need to know a person's caste? Unless the person is taking advantage of affirmative action policies, which are the policies that protect vulnerable groups, you don't need a person to declare their caste. Why? So unless somebody wants to use that information to their advantage, they shouldn't need to disclose it. So that is the social good. Then replicative studies. A, are you replicating somebody's study? If yes, why do you feel the need to replicate a study that has already been done? Okay. Either you don't trust it, or it was not sufficient, something was lacking. If all you're going to do is say, yes, I agree with so and so, there's no point of conducting that research other than completing paperwork that you may need for your own professional advancement. The second side of it is that whatever study you conduct must be replicable. You'll say, why? Why should somebody replicate my study? You just said that it's not okay to replicate studies. The reason for that is that if somebody were to doubt the results that you arrived at, they should be able to arrive at the same results using the methods that you have used. Once you have conducted your research and the result is out in the open, anyone who has any reason to doubt your research should be able to conduct a similar research and arrive at the same conclusion. So while your study needs to be replicable, for the purpose of assessment, for the purpose of inquiry, somebody wants to build on your research, they want to know how you did it, they want to replicate it, that's their choice. But we shouldn't replicate studies that have already been done unless we have a solid reason for doing that. Now we come to research misconduct. Research misconduct refers to significant misbehavior that improperly appropriates intellectual property or contributions of others, that intentionally impedes the progress of research, or that risks corrupting the scientific record or compromising the integrity of scientific practices. Okay, and we'll go into details of research misconduct. How do you ensure ethical research? Acquisition of samples. We have various types of samples. We have non-biological samples. So in the physical sciences, we have, we have samples in the physical sciences. So material, different chemicals, different land material, different types of stones, minerals, etc. Analytical sciences, which is what you deal with, financial, economic, demographic, etc. Social sciences, samples from observation of human life or activity. We have samples from the internet, which is probably what you are also dealing with. Samples from existing documents or literature. Then we have biological samples. Okay? Human, animal, plant-based biological samples or microorganisms. Again, research misconduct. Again, this is a theory. It hasn't been proven or disproven that the crisis that has been going on for the past 2 years was whether this crisis was man-made or accidental, or it was natural. Okay? So there are all kinds of theories circulating that somebody was conducting research on these viruses and some viruses escaped. Yes, there is a movie called Contagion. I don't know if you watched it. If you haven't, I would strongly advise you, or at least not advise, but maybe suggest this movie. It's called Contagion. Just watch it and, shivers will run down your spines. This movie was made several years before the COVID crisis came up. That's all I'll tell you about it. Scary. Yeah? It's called Contagion. Biological warfare is a reality. But there is no evidence to prove or disprove that the current COVID crisis was a natural phenomenon. Okay, so dealing with biological samples, collecting biological samples, and dead samples. So by dead samples, we don't mean inanimate object. We mean the carcasses of animals, dead bodies of human beings, dead animals, etc. Things that were once alive. Concerns regarding acquisition of samples. What is the source of the sample? Where have you got the information that you're working with? You all deal with big data, and the question that I've asked my students many times is, how do you define when data becomes big data? How many kilos of data, or how many, is there a quantifying number that distinguishes data from big data? At what points do you decide that it is big data? So my students tell me, ma'am, when it becomes impossible for the normal programs to deal with data. But then what is state of the art for you may be outdated from somebody else's perspective. Okay, so different levels of technological access. So how do you decide? However, that is another issue. Where have you got the sample from? Where have you got this information from? Okay. Again, there is no proof of this, but I have heard it from people who work in the business process outsourcing sector that it's a very common practice for business process outsourcing companies to buy personal information from agencies that are sworn to secrecy, from agencies that are collecting this information but not protecting it as they have promised to their customers. So it's very, very common to get this information, for them to get this information from hospitals, from banks, and other such organizations, which is a very sad state of affairs. Why should somebody else know about your personal information? However, that is what leads to these promotional calls, that is what leads to this promotional whole flurry of promotional activities that we face every day. What is the source of the data that you have collected? Increasingly in the international arena, since we are, since I'm talking to people in an educational institute, I must tell you, and many of you may have seen this, that you have to declare or you have to, while sending a paper for publication, you have to check a box that says that this data has been collected in an ethical and fair manner. Participants have been informed as to how this data is going to be used. Method of acquisition. Where have you got the information from? In the social sciences, we do a lot of primary research. So we go to people, we get first-hand information from them. Where, when it comes to artificial intelligence, my guess is that you take literally like bags or crates full of data that has already been generated through primary sources. So that is the source of the sample. So which database has given you that data? How did they acquire that data? How have you acquired that data? How did the database collect that data? And how have you taken that data from the database? Have you paid for it, or have you hacked into their database and just sort of taken the data that trickled down by chance? And it's again, as we progress in this session today, I will share with you what happens very, very often, and how it can be detected. But it's very important to acknowledge the source of information. So you will see in my slides that there is always the name of an author. Wherever it is not my information, wherever it is not information that I have understood on my own or generated on my own, I have mentioned the name of the author. It is just as a matter of respect. We give credit to the person who designed that or who came up with that information or knowledge. Financial concerns. Who has funded the research and why? Have you paid for the licensed data that you have got? Who has given you the money for it? Is it through valid sources or is it through unethical sources? I'll just give you an example. Again, this is not related to big data. However, this is related to a very interesting incident. I'll share something with you. I have the book here, so I'll just show you that book. Just a second. I will, 1 second, I'll pause this. While talking to you, I have realized that I have the book here with me, so I'll just show it to you. 1 second. Okay, am I audible?
Yes, madam, you are audible.
Is the screen visible? Can you see the slide now?
Yes, it is visible now.
Yes?
Yes, it is visible, ma'am.
Now I will, yeah. It's okay. So who funds and why? So I'll just stop sharing the screen and I'll show you what I wanted to show you. Yeah. Okay. There is this book. Is the book visible? Can you see it?
Yes, to some extent it is definitely visible. We can read the name.
It's called
Everybody Loves a Good Rot. Yes, yes, yes.
by P. Signer. This is Penguin Publications. And I'm sitting in my official residence, so the book was lying here. So I thought I'll show this to you and I'll just tell you the story behind this book. Very interesting story. Now, P. Sainath, a very well-known journalist, was commissioned by the leading political party in the 1990s to go to the poorest districts in India and just a second. Your entire screen. Okay, this is what worked. So he was commissioned to collect stories of the poorest districts from within India. And the political party said, look, you do this for us and we are paying you this much money to collect these stories and you give us these stories so it will help us canvas in those places. So he went and he collected the information and he gave the information to the people who had commissioned him. And then he compiled these stories in the form of a book that was eventually, called Everybody Loves a Good Drought. And in this book, there are different sections. So these sections are, it's like still crazy after all these years. So, or the health in rural India. Look at rural education. Problems of forced displacement. So there are 5, 6, 10 stories on forced displacement. Then there is survival strategies of the poor. So how people are surviving in rural areas, etc. Each story is about 5 or 6 pages long. And any human being with a semblance of a heart will start crying after reading this book. They are so painful, they are so vividly written, they are so candidly written that you don't know how to react. Okay? Who has funded your research? This was research. Who funded it? The political party funded it for their own personal gains. They wanted information. Sainath said, okay, but I will reserve the rights to the publication of this material wherever I want. And they said, all right. This book won many, many awards. So if you get a chance, do read it. This will give you a true picture of the real India in the 1990s. And I think in many cases, many of these things still exist. It's very painful. Who has funded your research? If whoever has funded your research will want to get something out of it. Okay. Now, whatever they want from it will have to be given to them. Okay. So, and how they use it is their concern. So you have to be very particular about taking money to get your data or getting access to funds to conduct your research. You must know as much as possible about the intention of the person who is funding your research. Okay? Who is funding it? What do they want out of it? How are they going to use the information eventually? And that is where your research comes in. Forbidden or confidential material. We want to lay our hands on confidential material just to get an edge over our competitors. However, is it ethical? Should people be entrusting their confidential material to you? Should these agencies like hospitals and banks be giving out personal information that they have collected on the bank enrollment forms, that they collect for opening lockers, for opening bank accounts, for issuing credit cards to people? Should they be sharing that information with somebody? No. Should hospitals be sharing health-related information with outsiders? Absolutely not. But do they do it? Of course. Yes, they do it. It's rampant. Why? Because the laws enforcing these privacy issues are not very stringent. They are still very flexible, and nothing really happens. You can file as many complaints as you want, but nothing really happens. Okay? But you must know, because increasingly these concerns are becoming important, and they are becoming visible, and you could get into trouble, and we'll come to that. Okay. Concerns regarding usage of samples. Sustainability and environment related concerns. How do you use the sample? Now, this is more for physical samples rather than the virtual samples that you collect, the big data that you collect. Physical samples, if you're collecting physical samples of material, of dead microorganisms or organic material, how do you dispose it of? Adherence to standard operating procedures, very, very crucial. Standard operating procedures are put in place to ensure ethical and accurate treatment of samples. So it's absolutely essential that these be followed. Wastage. Collect only as much information as you will need. Please do not waste information. Disposal of waste. How do you dispose of the waste? The part of the sample that you have not been able to use, whether it is the data, big data, secondary information, large chunks of data, do you destroy it? If it's physical papers, do you burn them? Do you shred them? What do you do? Because if you shred them, they can still be pieced together, but if you burn them, then they cannot be recovered. So how do you dispose of this waste material is really so that nobody can misuse it. Okay, physical material, biological, and virtual material. Treatment of human subjects, informed consent, again, while collecting data. As machine learning experts, you would probably need to go and check while dealing with data of human beings, whether people were informed or not. Transparency regarding usage of samples. Did they know that their information was being collected? Did they know that their information was being transmitted? Preservation of dignity, were they treated well, etc. Protection from harm, both physical and psychological. So medical testing, psychological testing, observations, etc. There is an oral history project on the 1947 partition archives. You would be aware about what happened in 1947. India was split into India and Pakistan, and people lost their families on both sides of the border. And now a bunch of historians and literateurs are going around for the past several years. They've been going around collecting stories from people who suffered during partition. And I came across these stories like many others. Our family also had first-hand experience with the losses during partition. So my only question was, how do you debrief them? And they said, what do you mean? And that was quite disturbing. You're collecting information, you're asking people to relive an experience that they may have taken years to get over. You are asking people to narrate the story of what happened just so that you can complete your research. But do you know that you are asking them to open up their wounds that may have healed over the course of time? So how do you debrief them? How do you help them recover from such an interrogatory, I would say, because you're asking them very specific questions. How do you help them recover from such specific questions regarding, okay, what did you feel, who did you lose, etc. They may have already dealt with it. However, you take them back into that environment and ask them to pull out this information. Confidentiality of human data. Again, this pertains to your work as machine learning experts. If data is marked confidential, and you know, to save some money, you say only one person will be using it, we buy individual subscription to some data. Do we only use it? Does only one person use it, or do you give access to of that individual subscription to everybody in your department? You know, how do you deal with that information? So, and debriefing, I already told you. Information about Aboriginals, endangered and protected communities, preservation of social and cultural fabric. A lot of research has been or is being conducted in on the Aboriginals of the Andaman Islands, and there are some tribes that are now off limits even to anthropologists, and a lot of permissions need to be taken. So just because you enter that space, they see you, their whole, I mean, you know, the sanctity of the personal space is disturbed, and that affects their cultural milieu. So that is another concern. Acquisition and usage of dead human samples, samples that just died, uh, plants, human beings, etc. Family must be treated as discussed in the previous slide. So you need to debrief people. Unclaimed cadavers and donations of cadavers, whether it's human or animal. How have those cadavers been collected, etc. Legal compliance and acquisition of dead samples. Standard operating procedures need to be followed. You may need to minimize wastage and appropriate disposal. I'm rushing through this because I'm guessing it doesn't apply to you very much. So I hope that's okay with you. Exhumation of geological samples. For reference, you can, if you are interested in you know, museums and information like this, you can visit this word, you can take the virtual tour of the Museum of Medical Oddities. You can note down this name, and it's quite interesting as to, you know, how medically odd samples have been collected and preserved. Now, the process involved in collecting those samples may need to be studied to get further information about it. Acquisition and usage of animals, replacement, reduction and refinement, 3 hours, pain and suffering. Again, you know, how do you replace the animals that you collect? Do you have breeding programs for them? How do you reduce the pain and suffering? How do you refine your procedures in such a way that you reduce your need for the usage of animal samples? How do you reduce the pain and suffering? How do you enrich your sample? And do you or do you not adhere to animal rights? Acquisition and usage of hazardous material, security of staff dealing with such material, absolutely essential, especially when you're dealing with radioactive material, secure disposal of such material. Now we come to the categories of ethical issues on of artificial intelligence. Dr. Sarkar, is it okay if we take a brief break? I have some problem with my throat. I'll just heat up some water and bring it.
Absolutely, ma'am. No issues.
Can we take a break for 2-3 minutes?
Definitely.
Thank you. So I'll just leave the slide on there.
requesting all the participants to please stay in the meeting. Our eminent speaker will be back within a couple of minutes. Please don't go anywhere. We'll be back shortly.
Thank you so much. I'm back. Can we, may I begin?
Yes, ma'am. Please begin.
Thank you. So some categories of ethical issues of artificial intelligence. You have issues arising from machine learning. You have issues arising as a result of living in a digital world. You have metaphysical issues. Right, so let's look at these issues one by one. And Dr. Sarkar, may I request you to please warn me at about 4:45?
Definitely, I'll do
Thank you
that.
so much. So issues arising from machine learning, we have issues related to privacy and data protection, lack of privacy, misuse of personal data, security problems. We have reliability, lack of quality data, lack of accuracy of data, and problems of integrity while collecting the data, hooking up data. Transparency, lack of accountability and liability. Who has collected data? So you say this was collected by so and so. So, you know, unless somebody is accountable, bias and discrimination, big problem in the collection, maintenance, treatment of data, of virtual data specifically. What do you include? What do you leave out? How do you decide what are the outliers? Purposive sampling has to be justified in, or convenience sampling has to be justified, when you write papers. So lack of accuracy of predictive recommendations, again, you know, when you're trying to predict human behavior, one does go wrong because human beings are very unpredictable. However, one has to keep trying. Lack of accuracy of non-individual recommendations. When you talk about safety, there is harm to physical integrity sometimes. Issues arising as a result of living in a digital world. We have economic issues. Computers have taken over, leading to the disappearance of jobs, concentration of economic power, cost to innovation, because everything is dependent on IoT, Internet of Things. Excuse me. Justice and fairness, contested ownership of data, who owns the data, negative impact on the justice system, lack of access to public services, again, depending on what data you're dealing with and how you're accessing the data, violation of fundamental human rights of end users, violation of fundamental human rights in the supply chain, privacy, fairness, etc. Negative impact on vulnerable groups. How do you collect information from vulnerable groups? How do you use it? How do you deal with it? And unfairness, freedom, lack of access to and freedom of information. What information do you share? Where do you share it? How will it be used? These days, it's really scary when one can not avoid the use of a smartphone. We all need to have smartphones. However, anything that you download on smartphone requires or asks for access to everything you have on the smartphone. So one is scared as to what might be taken, what kind of information might be retrieved from your phone and how it might be used. Even an accidental click can lead to so many problems. So how do you decide? Loss of human decision making. Again, there is a movie, very interesting movie called Idiocracy. If you get a chance, please watch it. Idiocracy, Idiocracy. It talks about how artificial intelligence will affect our ability to think, say maybe, several hundred years from now. Or how the way the world is going, artificial intelligence is a part of it, but do watch it if you get a chance. It's quite a fun movie. Loss of freedom and individual autonomy, definitely, work from home. We've all seen how that works. We initially thought that work from home would be easier. During COVID times, we were all sitting at home in the comfort of our homes, but that also meant that we were chained to our desks, even at home. We were multitasking, and so and because you have a cell phone that has been issued by the office, there's always this pull that anybody can contact you via the cell phone, anybody can send you an email, anybody can send you a WhatsApp message, and you are forced to respond to it even in the middle of the night, depending on what you're doing. So that is, it's the proverbial electronic leash around our necks. So there is really no freedom, and because everything is connected to everything else, and there is a monitoring system, there's a connecting system. I mean, you purchase something and immediately it goes into your profile saying that you visited such and such shop and paid electronically for this item. So you are connected, these are your preferences. So there is really no autonomy, and those are the suggestions that will come up when you're trying to search for something like that. Broader social issues, unequal power relations. Again, the more control you have over technology, the more access you have to technology, it creates a sense of power over those who don't have this, power asymmetries. There's negative impact on democracy, again, because word of mouth spreads, so people are more influenced by what is floating on the electronic media rather than taking time to mull over their own opinions and then form their own opinions. We are all being driven through herd mentality. Lack of informed consent, problems of control and use of data and systems, lack of trust because people are constantly hacking into these systems that are still developing, potential for military use, negative impact on health. Definitely anthropometrics is a very important field these days. Eye doctors are making tons of money because we have all these eye problems that are coming up because we are constantly on the screen. Reduction of human contact. Loneliness is a real problem because of technology. Artificial intelligence again has a role to play. You say how, if instead of talking to people and finding out their opinion on certain things, we choose to go to the only trustworthy Baba these days, which is Baba Google Dev. So, you know, we are losing that human touch. We don't pick up the phone and call up our relatives and say, okay, what do you think? And in doing so, we also re-establish contact with them. We find out how they are doing. That we don't visit our friends' places, show them things that we may have bought, or see things that they may have bought, or find out how they are dealing with their problems. We just go to Google, we go to Amazon, we get things, we compare things. We are doing everything electronically. Things that we used to do in person are being done electronically, which is really very, very sad. So that human contact is being lost out on, and we are becoming isolated, and that is leading to problems like depression and loneliness, and a reduction in social skills and a reduction in the social quotient. Excuse me. And there is a definite negative impact on the environment. Uncertainty issues, as things are shaping up, we don't know how different information will be used by people. Every day we hear about newer cases regarding how information is being used. Prioritization of the wrong problems again. On the one hand, excuse me, technology is helping us grow, do so many things. On the other, it's also taking us further away from the real nuts and bolts of day-to-day issues, potential for criminal and malicious use, some metaphysical issues. We are coming into the age of machine consciousness, awakening of artificial intelligence. We have become slaves of technology rather than masters of it, which is where we started. Instead of we controlling our use of technology, we are chained to our technological devices. We are letting technology control us. Autonomous moral agents, again, we are governed by what technology allows us and does not allow us to do. Super intelligence, singularity, again, increasing homogeneity in the social and cultural fabric, and changes to human nature. Now we come to the treatment and analysis of data. So these are some of the issues posed by artificial intelligence. And we talked about collection of information. Now we come to the treatment and analysis of data. Fabrication refers to making up of data or results and recording or reporting them. Falsification refers to manipulating research material, equipment, or processes, or changing or omitting data or results such that the research is not accurately represented in the research record. So creating data where there is none, or filling gaps where you may find them in an attempt to fit your research into a certain kind of mold. Excuse me. Using inappropriate statistical or other methods of measurement to enhance the significance of research findings. Samples with built-in bias, including only the preferred outliers in order to skew the results. Unduly highlighting some results and downplaying others. Misrepresenting through infographics. We have common infographics. They are informational graphics, so tables, charts, pie charts, bar graphs, Gantt charts, etc. They are all examples of infographics. These are graphics that give you information. Misrepresenting speculations as facts or releasing preliminary research results, especially in the public media, without providing sufficient data to allow peers to judge the validity of the results or to reproduce the experiments, especially in the medical field, especially in the field of IT or even artificial intelligence, where you say, okay, A leads to B, B leads to C, therefore A leads to C. Not really mentioning B as the the catalyst. So unless B happens, C cannot happen. However, we miss on that information and we straight away say, well, B is not required because A will lead to C. But in some cases, B as a catalyst may be required. Failure to retain significant research data for a reasonable period of time. Very, very essential. Excuse me. Again, there is a very interesting movie called Flash of Genius. Please watch it and you'll know what I'm talking about. It's about a gentleman who invented the windshield wiper in cars and how his formula was plagiarized by somebody, and then because he had saved his results, the battle proved to be quite interesting. So I will not reveal the details to you, but it's a very, very interesting movie. It's called Flash of Genius. So whenever you get a chance to watch it, you need to, it's always helpful to retain your research data so that whenever in doubt, either you or someone else can replicate the research results and come to the same conclusion that you did. Maintaining inadequate research records, especially for results that are published or are relied on by others. Now, when we conduct some research, people use it as a foundation. They refer to our papers and they use our research as a foundation to conduct more research. And it is important that we maintain our research records. Interpretation of data, logical fallacies are non-sequitur fallacy refers to attempting to tie together two or more logically unrelated ideas as if they were related. So, let's say, as soon as schools reopened, I can't think of an example. I'm sorry, but like totally unrelated. Okay, let's take the example of number of people suffering from a cold and the end term results. Okay, so the number of times a person sneezes in a day is related to the grade that person earns in the final exams. I mean, there may be a correlation there, but there is, a statistical correlation may exist, but this does not mean that there is a real clear-cut cause and effect relationship, which means that sneezing, just the act of sneezing, is not likely to lead to a drop in grades. If the sneezing is because of an allergic reaction that can be controlled, that is fine, then the student can study. So, or if the person has a condition that they have been able to manage, they can study on the day of the exam, they may be brilliant. So there are so many mitigating factors there. But what the media does is they take these unrelated things, they tie them together, and logically unrelated conclusions can become, they are proposed, and that creates a problem. Either or fallacy, asserting that a complex situation can have only two possible outcomes, one of which is necessarily preferable. So, either all engineering students are bright, they have an IQ of, or they're all brilliant, or they're all borderline intelligent. There is no average intelligence there. So you say either they are underperformers or they are overperformers. There is no middle ground for them. Oversimplification, again, we can oversimplify our results without going into the details of why certain results appear to be the way they did. Hasty generalization refers to assertion of a thesis on the basis of a single reason or an isolated example. Just because I have this one example, I can say that everything relates in category A relates to everything in category B. Why? Because there is one common factor between A and B. Sweeping generalization, failing to qualify the applicability of the thesis and asserting that it applies to all instances instead of to some instances. So, for example, again, I'm not at liberty to take names of different countries, but we all know that the blame for the spread of the coronavirus was pinned on one specific country in the world. And, so that's a sweeping generalization, unless proven, not guilty unless proven otherwise. That is the rule that we must apply. However, till all the data is collected, we should not make a sweeping generalization. And even people who had not traveled to that country but had some roots in that country were ostracized on the basis of the sweeping generalization. Overgeneralization, failing to qualify the thesis and asserting that it is certainly true rather than that it may be true. We should just because my results indicate that this is true, it must be true. This data set indicates that X leads to Y, so X will always lead to Y. Why? Because my data set says so. Not realizing that another data set may come up with another explanation or another interpretation saying that maybe Y leads to X and not the other way around. Treatment of fellow researchers, conferring or requesting authorship on the basis of a specialized service or contribution that is not significantly related to the research reported in the paper. And this is unfortunate, and I hope I'm not touching a raw nerve here, but if there are students in this group, again, in some places it is considered the done thing to add your guide's name to your research paper because they have been guiding your research work. But that is not really appreciated in the international circles, because unless the person concerned has contributed equally to the paper, they should not be the co-author on your paper. And that unfortunately is not the case in many places. So my apologies, I'm not even able to see who all are sitting because I'm focusing on the slide. However, this is a very common thing here. So we just add authors because we feel that we owe them that authorship. Refusing to give peers reasonable access to unique research material or data that support published papers. So we don't allow them access. We say, okay, you go and look for this information on your own. I have generated it. I have access to it, but I will not share this with you. Exploiting research scholars, subordinates, or team members, that is bad. The politics of co-authorship, I'll share an example with you. Many years ago, in another institute, it was detected that there was a team of researchers and they were publishing the same paper 5 or 6 times. It was a team of 5 or 6 people, and in every conference, they would change the title a little bit and submit the same paper with another person as the first author. So the order of authorship would change, and the content would be more or less the same, but it would be published under 6 different names in 6 different journals. And of course, eventually it was detected and those people were heavily penalized. So that is, and you give co-authorship to people who you think you owe something to. You remove people who have not really contributed to your work as a co-author. So that is unfortunately the political issue here. Institutional integrity, relationship between researchers, their sponsoring institutions, funding agencies, and the government. Why do you conduct research? Who are you doing it for? Who is paying for it? All of that comes in here. Conflict of interest. Again, we all understand this, so I won't spend time on this. Conflict of commitment. Unless you are fully committed to your project, please don't get involved in it. Please don't conduct your research. Don't do a shoddy job of it. Commit to only as much as you can do, and commit to only what you can do. So you commit to, running, say, a program 3 times. However, you're not able to do it 3 times. So you say maybe only after 2.5 times, half the run, I'll just take the results from half the run, or I'll exclude the results of the third run and I will only take the results of the 2 runs. But because 3 runs are mandated, I'll write 3 runs, but I don't have the time, I don't have the resources to run the program for the third time. And so we mention all those things that can create a problem. Or your institute is not committed, your parent organization is not committed to giving you those resources. Regulatory compliances, again, increasingly it is becoming very, very important to have, for educational organizations to have ethical committees that can attest to the ethical collection and treatment of data before it goes for publication. And increasingly journals are asking for the ethical committee decisions on the data that has been collected. So regulatory compliance, again, it becomes important. Institutional demands and support. It's always best to conduct research with the support of your parent organization rather than going against it. However, you're the best judge of how you must do it, but don't conduct research at the cost of other responsibilities that you may have within your own organization. Do find time for it outside of those responsibilities, so that you're not divided. Social responsibility, again, with relationship between research and the common good. I just told you about it. Who is it going to help? How is it going to help them? What is the environmental impact going to be? And is it forbidden knowledge or not? Design of weapon or destructive machinery, etc. Then there is this concept of responsible research and innovation, RRI. It's a transparent, interactive process by which social actors and innovators become mutually responsive to each other with a view to the ethical applicability, sustainability, and societal desirability of the innovation process and its marketable products, in order to allow proper embedding of scientific and technological advances in our society. Okay, so we need to conduct research responsibly so that in addition to satisfying our professional and personal needs, it also adds value to the society. Ethical principles of artificial intelligence: transparency, absolute must; justice and fairness; non-maleficence, you should not conduct or you should not use artificial intelligence or the research in artificial intelligence to hurt someone else. Do it responsibly. Ensure the privacy of all concerned. Ensure the privacy of data. Beneficence, it should benefit the end user. Freedom and autonomy, again, to the extent possible, the research should be conducted with the with the researcher being given the autonomy and freedom to process and treat the data as required. Trust. So these are some of the ethical principles. Sustainability and dignity of the sustainability of the environment, of the data must be preserved. If you've taken data, make sure you replace it, don't destroy data. Again, the databases need to be preserved. They must be labeled appropriately so that they can be used later by people who need to use them. Preserve the dignity of the people whose information you are taking. Preserve the dignity of the sources that you're taking the information from, and maintain trust. Okay, and solidarity with the organization and the society at large. Now we come to reporting. Dr. Sarkar, how are we doing on time?
Ma'am, it is about 4:40.
Okay, so ho jayega. That's fine. Thank you. Reporting refers to the ethical management of information that requires both factual and accurate presentation. So you've collected the data, you've processed it, you've come out with the results. Now you need to share it with people who can use this information the way it was meant to be used. Okay. So, individuals who alter results by reporting truthful but incomplete data that will skew the findings or mismanaging information. Ethical writing requires that with access to the same information and knowledge, others may reasonably reach the same conclusions as the writer. I'm repeating this again and again. Academic misconduct, plagiarism is the kidnapping of others and others' words. There is a professor called Professor Wendy Sutherland Smith. She's based in Australia. She has been conducting research on plagiarism. Amazing work. So do read it sometime. Plagiarism means to take and use another person's ideas and or manner of expressing them and to pass them off as one's own by failing to give appropriate acknowledgement. This includes material from any source, staff, students, or the internet, published and unpublished works. It's the act of taking, borrowing, stealing, misappropriating, passing off an object, which includes language, style of expression, work, computer images, choreography, graphics, etc., from a source, which includes books, journals, web, published or unpublished document, by an agent, that includes student, person, or academic, without adequate acknowledgement, with or without the intention to deceive. We can never say I did not know what I was doing. Fact about plagiarism, it is always intentional. We always know what we are doing. We may be influenced by others. Again, a question that has come up repeatedly is, ma'am, but after I read so many papers, I start writing like these authors. It is okay to be influenced. It is okay to be not really influenced. I'm sorry, I'm missing out on the word, but you know, when we read something, our style of writing becomes like a person whose work we have been. Again, I'm sorry, I'm missing out on the right word here, but whose work we have been impressed by, whose work has positively influenced our way of thinking, whose work we are convinced by. Okay. However, when we are writing it, we must develop our own understanding of what we have read and then use our own words to write. Different forms of academic misconduct. This may seem like a repetition of what we did a couple of minutes ago. Copying, using someone else's work and not acknowledging the person. Cheating is fabrication of data, procedures, etc. Contract cheating, having somebody else do your work for you. Patch writing, copying from a source text, then deleting some words, altering grammatical structures, or plugging in one-for-one synonym substitutes. Let me show you. Okay, please read the first paragraph. Because women's wages often continue to reflect the fiction. Let me just show you the second one also. Here, because becomes since. I've highlighted the words that have been changed. Because becomes since. Women's wages often continue to reflect the remains the same. Fiction becomes mistaken notion. So the first one is original. The second one is copied. Earn the family wage becomes are the main wage earners in the family. Single mothers rarely remains the same. Earn becomes make. Enough to support themselves and their children remains the same. Adequately becomes very well and becomes also. Because work is still organized, work is still remains the same. Organized around means becomes based on. The assumption that mothers stay at home with the children remains the same. And these three phrases are sort of childcare facilities is moved up, even though few mothers can afford to do so, is removed altogether. In the United States, remain woefully inadequate becomes remain woefully inadequate in the United States. And the person who wrote the second paragraph said, I wrote it in my own words. This is patch writing. You just take it, you change a few things and you say, no, these are my own words. These are not your own words. It is clear that this has been copied from someplace, and to avoid or to bypass the similarity detection softwares like Turnitin, these changes have been made. And the source for this is mentioned here, so you can go through it. Okay. Other forms of plagiarism, claiming originality regarding material copied directly from outside sources, deliberately failing to cite the sources, improperly documenting quoted, paraphrased, or summarized source material. So you just write somebody's name randomly without checking whether the person really wrote what had been written. Extending the length of a bibliography to meet project requirements by including sources not used in your research or making them up altogether. See, the reason why we use references is, one, to acknowledge the work done by the original researcher and published by the author. Two, to allow the reader to go back to the original source and find out more information if they wanted to. So unless the bibliography is accurate, the details of the reference mentioned in the bibliography at the end of text are accurate, the reader cannot find more information, and that becomes a problem for the researcher. That becomes a problem for somebody who's trying to build on the information that you have generated. Other forms, recycling the same work and submitting it to different places, receiving help from other authors and turning it under your own name, having a student collect the data and saying, well, students don't deserve to be co-authors, that's bad. Collectively researching and writing a paper, this I just told you about, collectively doing a paper and then modifying it slightly and turning in copies to different sources. Some causes of professional misconduct. Why do we resort to practices like this? Lack of expertise. We don't know what we are talking about. We don't know what we are doing. Lack of awareness. We are not aware about what plagiarism might be, what research misconduct might be. Laziness, obvious. Fear of failure. We feel that we lack the necessary skills to write things. We know what we've done, we know what we are talking about, but we are scared to put it down on paper. English is not my first language. I studied in a vernacular medium. I've heard this time and again from my students. I understand this, but you are engineers. And as an engineer, saying that you cannot use a screwdriver is a matter of shame. English is just a tool. It is just a tool. If the internet had been developed in Polish or one of the Scandinavian languages, we would be having this conversation in that particular language. We gave so much of importance to the English language because of the colonial residue that is there in our society. People who speak English are better than people who cannot speak English. But for whatever it is worth, English is just that proverbial screwdriver. अगर आप इंजीनियर हो और आप पेचकस नहीं चला सकते ये कह के कि जी मैंने बचपन में पेचकस को कभी हाथ नहीं लगाया था, तो then it is wrong. This is the medium that we are using to communicate. Your bachelor's, master's, PhD has been in the English language. तो मेहरबानी करके ट्यूशन लेके कोई कोर्स करके मेहरबानी करके अपनी ग्रामर को ठीक करो. Please become familiar with the usage of this tool called the dreaded English language. डरना नहीं है, डराना है लोगों को अपने काम से. Why should you be scared? If you have honestly done your work, why should you be scared? If you have been able to become proficient in something that you started learning only during your bachelor's program, by doing your PhD, you have acquired a certain level of proficiency and understanding about that particular issue that others could not become proficient in. How many people that you went to school with became engineers and then did their masters and then did their PhDs from reputed colleges? How many? You have been able to achieve that. So why can't you achieve a certain level of working proficiency in this tool of a language? Why fear failure? Okay, but we fear it, and that is why we resort to these things. Peer pressure. Everybody is doing it, हम भी कर लेंगे, तो क्या हो जाएगा? Egotism and the drive for self-enhancement. Somebody is publishing 10 papers, I must publish 25 papers in a year. Merit है, नहीं है, जाने दो. I have to do it. Pressure to perform, again, our promotion requirements need us to perform. Lack of proficiency, I just told you about. Perception that big words and complicated flowery language will leave a good impression about the author. Okay. Big flowery language is of no use. You must write in a language that others can understand. Okay. You must use a language that people can use. I'll share a story that I heard from my father growing up. My father used to, in school, he had heard this from somebody who used to study Persian. So there's a word called ab in Persian. You probably heard about it. So, or maybe I'll tell you another story. You may not be able to relate to this. 1 second. I think I have that saved somewhere. 1 second, I'll pull out the right story. So please give me a second to pull it out. No, it's not here. No. Anyway. So, a child learned the meaning of aab in school, means water, and came home and he wanted to impress his parents, and he was thirsty, so he said, Ma aab, aab, aab. And the mother tried everything in her capacity to find out what the child was asking for, but she could not understand. And this child kept saying aab, 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 and finally was dehydrated and died. And the mother was lamenting, and the couplet goes like this: Aab aab kar moyo bachda, farsiyan ghar gale, which means aab karte karte, bolte bolte, mera beta mar gaya. फारसियां घर गाले मतलब फारसी ने मेरे घर में परेशानी क्रिएट कर दी, जे मैनू पता होंदा भर भर देती प्याले. अगर मुझे पता होता तो मैं प्याले भर भर के कप्स भर भर के बेटे को पानी पिलाती, पर उसने पानी नहीं बोला, वो आब करता रहा और इसी चक्कर में वो मर गया. आप सही लैंग्वेज नहीं यूज करोगे, बड़े बड़े वर्ड्स यूज करोगे, किसी की समझ में नहीं आएगा, एंड योर पेपर विल नॉट बी पब्लिश्ड, है ना. और in an attempt to use big words, paper publish हो भी जाएगा, but in an attempt to use big words, we end up resorting to professional misconduct. कि भी I don't know the meanings, I am not Shashi Tharoor, sorry, but I'm sure we can take a joke of, we all joke about his proficiency in the English language. Well, he was also an ordinary person like us at one point of time, still is, but he's become proficient in the language. Anyway. So big words and complicated flowery language will leave a good impression about you. That is not always true. If you want to do that, become proficient yourself. Lack of clear policies to prevent or penalize unethical practices. That is another reason why we resort to misconduct, because usko rokne wala koi nahi hai. How do you stop it? You say, I did not know. मुझे तो पता ही नहीं था ये पैच राइटिंग है, हमने तो अपने वर्ड्स में लिखा था. I just showed you an example of patch writing. You know what you're doing, but you don't want to admit it. And if you do something wrong, the maximum punishment will be a slap on the wrist and you'll be let go. So वो गलत है. Consequences अब ये सब करने से होता क्या है? Credibility is lost. If detected, you will lose your professional credibility. Your reputation, credibility means believability. Your reputation will be lost, professional reputation. And sometimes these things are detected at a very late stage. I had heard the case of a professor at Harvard University, highly professionally decorated. Decorated means this gentleman had lots of awards and all. And two of his researchers complained, so he was doing some research with chimpanzees on the behavior of chimpanzees. And he was misreporting the behavior of chimpanzees. So he said, when chimpanzees hear this sound, they turn their neck so they understand this. Now, two of his lab researchers knew what was going on, and they finally spoke up and they said he's getting so many funds and so much of grant and all, but he's misreporting these things. Those two people vanished overnight. They were never heard about, never discussed in professional circles. However, an inquiry was conducted into the report of these two researchers, and that gentleman was found to be guilty. The professor was found to be guilty of misrepresenting his work, and eventually all his awards were taken back, and he was severely penalized. But that was very late into his work as a senior researcher. I've forgotten the details. This was about 10-12 years ago. So your reputation can suffer. Professional implications, legal implications. Control C, Control V, bad ideas. Very bad ideas. Please give credit, because if you were doing something, somebody took your work and passed it off as their own, how would you feel? Aapko bhi gussa aayega na? So why do it? Okay, so legal implications, you have to be very, very careful. Intellectual property is increasingly becoming more and more important. We have a school of intellectual property law at IIT Kharagpur. So, increasingly, intellectual property is becoming more and more important, even in the virtual domain. Not only as patents for hardcore manufacturing kind of innovative ideas, but also in the domain of virtual creation or virtual innovation. Cost to funding agencies, definitely. If you misreport results, all that money that has gone into your development of a particular project is wasted. Cost to academia, anyone who tries to replicate your research or use it as a foundation for their research is bound to fail, because your results were fabricated in the first place. Leads to cost to future knowledge creation and professional careers of future scholars. Okay? And there is a cost to society. You say this medicine has no side effects. Eventually, the medicine does end up having side effects, and you don't report the correct side effects to people, so that can create problems. Case in point, a movie called Erin Brockovich. Has anyone, you probably watched it? Erin Brockovich, old movie, Julia Roberts. So when this chemical manufacturing plant did not reveal the results of the tests that were conducted on their waste disposal, problems happened, and then eventually somebody went and discovered everything that had gone wrong. But by then the damage had been done. Some guidelines for ethical research: law of the land. Always follow the law of the land. Please follow the standard operating procedures within your field, or the standard operating procedures set by your organizations, and adhere to the ethical research guidelines for your field. Always different types of organizations that discuss these guidelines. You have WHO, you have National Institutes of Health, American Psychological Association, ESRC UK for the physical sciences. You have so different fields, you have different sets of guidelines. And that brings us to the end of this session, and the floor is now open for questions, comments, and concerns. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, madam, for delivering such an outstanding lecture on something which I think every researcher must know about. We were really expecting to hear an excellent session on research ethics, but madam, you have exceptionally covered a lot of aspects about artificial intelligence, and that too in a very lucid and excellent manner as well. We are
Thank you
thankful to
so
you,
much.
ma'am.
Thanks a lot.
And I'm
Thank you.
sure that all the participants, research fraternity have found the delivered lecture to be extremely informative and beneficial. Madam, we have some questions, and I am reading out the questions for you.
If you can share them with me in the chat box, I'll be
Yes, yes,
very
yes, yes, yes. I'm reading out the question. The first question that came from Professor Ganapati is that what constitutes ethical behavior to define and to build artificial intelligence?
excuse me. What constitutes ethical behavior to?
Behavior in case of to define and to build artificial intelligence.
Again, I'm guessing it has to do with the manner in which the data is sourced and the information is treated. Dr. Ganapati, are you there?
Ma'am, actually the questions came in the YouTube streaming.
Acha, acha.
So it should be a bit difficult to track on the participant.
Okay, can you share the link to the YouTube stream with me in the chat
Yes,
box?
yes. I'm trying to do that.
Yeah. So I'm again, my knowledge. Thank you. My knowledge of the field of artificial intelligence is quite limited. However, from whatever I know about it, I think it has a lot to do with the manner in which the information is collected and then treated. So everything that was shared with you regarding the collection of data and how it is treated. So I think that would probably define ethics in artificial intelligence.
Okay, the next question I can see is what to do about the unintended consequences of artificial intelligence?
What to do about the unintended consequences? Please specify your question. That's a very general question.
Yes,
But if you can just specify which unintended
consequences of artificial
consequences you
intelligence.
are talking about, that would help me respond much better. But I'm again, I can only guess what they meant. So if it has something to do with privacy, you should try and at least cover the ground to the extent possible at your end. Make sure that you are not passing on the information that may have accidentally landed in your lap onto others. Make sure that whatever you are doing is as sturdy and as much on ethically solid ground as possible, and that there is a limit to which we can control things. So to the extent possible, please control how you treat the information. Please control how you take the information, how you receive it, how you treat it, how you share it, how you report it, and then the domino effect can start. So once you do it, and then if everybody in their own individual capacities makes it a point to ethically treat the information they receive, the demand for unethical release of information will go down. And that is, I think, that should help you deal with it. I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question is that came from Professor Ramya. Any similarities or connections between professional ethics and research ethics?
I'm not sure what she means by professional ethics.
Any
That's why it would
connections
have helped if
between these two ethics? Yes.
they were logged in. So if Professor Ramya is here, it will help if you can please specify what you mean by professional ethics here.
I'm not getting response from
Yeah.
Professor Ramya still now. I think that should be all. I think to all the participants, if you have questions for ma'am, you can easily reach her in her official email ID that can easily found from the websites of IIT
Thank
Kharagpur.
you.
I think that should be better if you the participants may have other questions.
Yes,
Yes,
absolutely.
yes, 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 absolutely. So requesting participants, if you have question, to directly contact with ma'am in her official email ID. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yes, yes. And ma'am, before you leave the meeting, there is a small token of appreciation and gratitude that we would like to present to you. Allow me to
Thank
share my
you.
screen.
Thank you so much.
Most welcome, ma'am. Most welcome. We'll also mail the certificate to you.
Thank you.
So, thank you again so much, ma'am, for your valuable and kind presence with us and deliverance of an excellent lecture. And definitely, we look forward to have you with us again in such kind of events, such kind of sessions in near futures, right?
Please
Yes.
let me know if there's any way I can help you. And thank you very much, Professor Joardar, for reaching out and for staying in touch and for your constant reminders. And thank you so much, Dr. Sattar, for conducting the session in such an efficient manner. Thank you all. Thanks a lot for being such a wonderful audience. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Namaskar.
So, on that note, we are concluding the session and requesting all the participants to join in on our tomorrow's sessions as well, starting exactly at 3 p.m. And as usual, the meeting link will be provided and shared prior to the commencement of tomorrow's sessions. So, thank you all for attending today's session of the FDP. See you all on tomorrow. Have a nice rest of the day. The attendance form has been shared in the both platform chat box. Please have a look. Yeah. Thank you.